Welcome to the Fightful MMA podcast. I know you're expecting a guy with a bit longer hair and a bit of an accent, but unfortunately, he's running a little bit late today. I am James Lynch, and I'll be carrying this ship for the meantime. But as always, we're joined by Showdown Joe. Joe, how are you?
Doing pretty good, man. I'm just informing everybody on the social media that we're live on the air. How are you, sir?
I'm doing fantastic. Can't complain. Some great weather here in BC. Is Toronto getting pretty cold right now, I imagine, this time of year?
It is absolutely chilly. Bad news for me is I tried to cover the I put an above ground pool for my son. It's pretty big, nothing expensive, but it's great for the kids, 10 years and under sort of thing. And the cover is incorrect, so half of it went into the pool and now it's frozen. So I've got to get out there eventually and break that ice and do that. But it's getting cold out here, man. Snow. All the kids are wearing boots already. So yeah, getting pretty chilly.
As I'm sure people watched the UFC Denver card on Saturday, Ross Sapp did a post-fight show on Fightful MMA. So we actually have the unique opportunity, Joe, you and I, to talk about that finish in the main event, and we'll go through the card as well. But first, just your reaction to seeing that knockout. Was this the greatest knockout of all time? Where do you rank this?
Oh, wow. Was it the greatest knockout of all time? It's up there. I mean, there's no denying that it's up there, especially because A, the technique, B, being able to pull it off. Timing wise, with 1 second left or a little bit less, it's up there. I still think Edson Barboza, even Anderson Silva, the way he knocked out Vitor Belfort, but Edson Barboza is one of those knockouts that just stunned everybody. There was an old one, Frank Shamrock, against, I think, Igor Zinoviev, where it was a double leg takedown knockout, knocked him out completely. Matt Hughes, Carlos Newton. But in terms of excitement, this knockout with Yair Rodriguez and the Korean Zombie was just something to behold. It was unreal. What a fight, and the way to end it like that is magical.
What's crazy too is that Zombie was up on the scorecards as we saw. So I mean, that was going to be an L for Rodriguez, and he pulls it out with a second left. I look at the context of this knockout too. Yair Rodriguez was not a member of the UFC roster in the summer, and he was supposed to return against Zabit, which I don't think that was a favorable matchup for him. That fight ends up getting scrapped. He fights Zombie. He was about to lose this fight, and now he's going to be on highlight reels forever. I was making the reference the other day to, this will be one of those knockouts that we look at just like the Anthony Pettis flying off the cage, kick on Benson Henderson. It's going to live with him forever, regardless of how his career ends up. So this is a huge win for Yair Rodriguez, and I really think a big win for the UFC as well, because Rodriguez, a Latin-speaking fighter, someone they can market in that area, and if they ever go down to Mexico again, he is a guy they should be building on, and I think you have to capitalize on this by giving him, a main event in his next fight as well, whether it's, a veteran or whoever, but you need to take advantage of this. And Rodriguez, I know, saw today, moves up in the rankings to the number 11 spot. So he moves up 4 spots from before.
Well, who does he face off next, though? I mean, there's Volkanovski right above him. Josh Emmett's coming off a loss. Bektik won. It's Cub Swanson's there. I mean, there's some really good matchups. I think we got to keep him away from the likes of Frankie Edgar right now, because we all saw what happened the first time, but you never know. It could be one of those situations where the UFC is like, no, we should put it on again. I doubt it. But it's weird how all this triangle sort of unfolds, because that was Frankie Edgar's spot, taking on Korean Zombie. Technically, would he have had his hand raised in victory? The one thing I do like is what's next for Korean Zombie, because I've got all the time in the world for that guy. He just emanates class. He's just goes out there, does the job, doesn't wreak havoc. Absolutely love his walkout song, obviously Zombie with the Cranberries. So everything about the Korean Zombie is just something I absolutely adore. I think he's fantastic. But yeah, kudos to Yair Rodriguez. It'd be very interesting to see who they match him up against next.
Well, I think a logical fight, I would think, in terms of name value and everything, the Ricardo Lamas and Darren Elkins fight that's taking place this weekend, that seems like a reasonable fight for Rodriguez, because, again, he's not getting thrown to the wolves at the top of the heap, and he's fighting, either fighter, whoever wins, especially Lamas, who's a former title challenger. I think that would be a good matchup. And for Zombie, how about Jeremy Stephens? He was a guy coming off a loss against Aldo, had a lot of momentum. I mean, that I think would be a good matchup for him. But I'm with you. Other as their prospects in the division. Let's move along to the co-main event. Donald Cerrone showing he still has life at either 170 or 155. We don't know where he's going to fight next, but gets a submission win over Mike Perry. Joe, just your thoughts on the matchup. Cerrone was an underdog and really had his back against the wall heading into this fight.
Before I say anything, do you recall what I told Sean last week? Did I say don't put 5 on Cerrone or don't put 5 on Perry?
I think it was don't put 5 on Perry. I think you were on Cerrone, if I remember.
Okay, because I'm trying to recall who is one of those things, because I know when I watched the fight, I'm like, he's going to just take it down to the ground. It's going to go to the ground, and he's going to submit Perry. He's not going to bother, even though he can stand and trade. Why bother? Because he's taken some abuse in the stand-up. But the victory, being able to pull off that victory via submission, shouldn't overly surprise too many people, because, you know, Cowboy's got fantastic ground game. He's got a fantastic submission arsenal. He can pull it out whenever he wants, especially against guys that he feels, I guess he's technically superior on the ground. So he did what he had to do. Very, very impressed. Surprised that he's saying, you know what, he wants to go back to 155 pounds, calling out Khabib, getting, you know, sending out the warning shots to Khabib to get ready, you know, Cowboy's back, Cowboy's coming sort of thing. He's an older guy, not old, but an older guy to cut that weight, James. I don't know if that's wise, but Cowboy's motivated now. He's got the little guy, he's got the baby. You know, things change. You know what it's like when you have a child. The brain changes a little bit. You don't just do things for yourself anymore. You do it for the family.
Yeah. I wonder if the UFC looks at this win from Donald Cerrone and looks again at a potential matchup against McGregor, because I've said this many times on this show, you need a fight that McGregor can win next, or at least be very competitive in. Cerrone has a lot of name value. If he wants to go down to 55, I think that benefits McGregor. You know, as we know, as fighters, you know, move on in their careers and they go down a weight class, they tend not to fare as well. And this might be a good, you know, sort of savior for McGregor. Although if they do want to go that Nate Diaz fight, I think maybe they capitalize on that too, but that's something that sort of popped into my head when Cerrone won. But yeah, I don't know. I think if he's having success at 170, stay there. I know it's a tougher path to the title. I think both, you know, title paths are pretty tough. But you know, if it's working at welterweight, why change things? I don't know. That's just, you know
what, you make a very, very valid point, because you look at what Cerrone has done over his career. Obviously, he's got the most UFC victories. He's got the most UFC victories by submission. He's received so many bonuses. He's made a lot of money. Taking on a guy like Conor McGregor would give him the biggest payday, and it's almost a thank you with the UFC to give Cerrone a Conor McGregor fight, biggest payday of his career, win or lose. If he does lose, he could sail off into the sunset. Good luck with that with Cerrone, but it's a massive payday, and you know it'd be a fantastic. I don't know how much back and forth it'll be between the two, because, you know, Conor's going to try and get into his head, say this, say that, blah, blah. But I think that's a great fight. I think you're bang on. That'd be a fantastic fight, because, you know, it is a winnable fight for Conor McGregor. So, yeah, I really like that fight. And it's almost a thank you, despite the potential loss, but a thank you to Cerrone on behalf of the UFC. And don't kid yourself. If that fight does hit the ground, you know, Cerrone can stand and bang with Conor. He can do it. Conor's faster. He's probably got more power at this point in his career. But if that fight hits the ground, man, look out.
Yeah. No, Cerrone always threatening with the ground game. So that's an interesting style matchup there. Let's talk about the women's bantamweight fight. Germaine Durand.
Whoa. Sean's here.
We got him.
Snuck in. I like the Cerrone fight. Cerrone is such an underrated grappler at this point. Yes. And my God, man, that guy does not get the credit he deserves for being a good grappler. James, I want to know, do you have any insight on the Winklejohn thing? I mean, well, boy, that seems salty. I compared it to Suge Knight showing up at the award show and being like, you don't want your producer all in the videos, all on the tracks, come to Jackson Winklejohn.
Yeah.
Like, man, like, come on, dude.
Yeah, the only insight I have is, I mean, I interviewed Diego Sanchez recently, and you know, he's on the side of Wink. Chris Brown, not to be confused with the singer, he's an up and coming prospect at Jackson's as well. He trashed Cerrone when I spoke to him. So, you know, I kind of got that side of things, but now reading everything from, you know, Ricky, the president of Jackson Wink, the messages that were released, hearing from Cerrone, it's a bad situation all around. You know, they're accusing him of bullying. I don't know what to think at this point. I mean, I guess the biggest test will be, you know, do these fighters stick around at Jackson Wink? I think that will be the you know, the telling thing, because if Winklejohn is this bully, you know, you can go to other camps. You know, fighters have that option. So, I mean, the bigger name fighters, I mean, we're talking about Holly Holm and Jon Jones and Michelle Watterson. I mean, they're big enough names that they could go somewhere else. So I think time will tell. But yeah, the truth is somewhere in the middle here. But just it's an unfortunate part of the sport where you're going to have, you know, egos and things that happen and fight matchups, like in this case where you had two former teammates facing off against each other.
So also another thing I wanted to mention, we had somebody in the live chat on my post show the other night that said, Korean Zombie could have just coasted to victory. And I'm thinking, no, he couldn't. Not if you're Korean Zombie and you had that fight against against Leonard Garcia that you should have won back in the day, and you remember how that went down, how could you feel comfortable coasting? And then we got the situation that unfolded the way that it did. But the main event and co-main event of UFC Denver, and those were a blast to watch. And James, you spoke to Maycee Barber, who really made her presence felt on this show as well, both before and I believe after the fight, correct?
Yes, I did. Yes, we got an interview. I mean, you could almost call it an exclusive. I know she did the show live with Ariel and everyone else, but we got our interview up first. I just want to point that out. And Maycee, very happy, obviously, getting a pretty solid win. And like Joe referenced with Hannah Cifers, Hannah had a great first round. I don't think this was a losing effort. I mean, Hannah lost the fight, but I think she still gained some notoriety just for the fact that in that first round, it was close. And it wasn't until the second where Maycee really took over and got the finish. She calls out Mackenzie Dern. Don't think that's going to happen, although I did ask her about how the potential matchup would go. I mean, the UFC, that would be dumb matchmaking, just putting two prospects against each other. But Maycee Barber, for those in the know, we've known how good she is. She definitely proved that on Saturday. And 20 years old, guys. I mean, the future's in her hands at this point. I'm excited for what's next.
Knows the right things to do as well. Immediately calling out a big name like that. That says a lot about her. The fact that she had a name in mind. And that's important. Joe, we often talk about that, about these fighters that are like, anybody. Not everybody's Donald Cerrone. Not everybody can literally get anybody on a day's notice or 2-3 months notice. Maycee Barber, while they want to push her, is not at that level yet, Joe. So I thought it was good that she had a name in mind.
Oh yeah, it's always important, and I mean we can't stress it enough. The importance of that post-fight interview. That's when the most amount of eyeballs are on you, and believe it or not, whether they admit it or not, or whether it gets planted subliminally into the mindset of the UFC matchmakers, you've now kind of put them on a spot by announcing it publicly on a much larger audience. So it's kind of those they have to react. It's either yay or nay. Right? And whether they do it on social media or not, or whether the fighters do it on social media or not, just isn't that much or that many viewers tuned in or followers in terms of that. So doing it while you've got that post-fight interview is the best time. So kudos to her for doing it. Fantastic job.
And I should mention there's a little bit of backstory here too with this matchup, because they almost fought in LFA. If you remember, Mackenzie was sort of honing her craft there. Maycee was also undefeated as well in LFA. So these two almost fought. I guess the issue was that Maycee wanted to fight on a different card. Mackenzie couldn't make it, and then I think Mackenzie went to Invicta after that, so it didn't end up lining up. But I have a feeling we'll see them fight in the future. I just don't think that'll be the next matchup. Yeah.
Also on this show, you had a lot of names. There were a couple names that were hanging on. I called the second fight on this show perhaps the most inconsequential fight, or the most insignificant fight you'll see all year. It was between two guys who were kind of holding on in a flyweight division that may or may not be going. We'll talk about that later. Mm-hmm. But then there were some fights like Germaine de Randamie and Raquel Pennington that by all means should have been the most important fight on this show. A former champion against a former title challenger, and Germaine de Randamie did nothing to enter her name back into the title picture, at least in my estimation. Joe, what did you think of this performance? I mean, she won, but first off, Raquel Pennington did not look like she was prepared for this fight, and Germaine de Randamie probably should have handled this with, I don't want to say with ease, but man, a lot differently than she did.
You know what? I was actually, I'm going to give kudos to Germaine de Randamie, because I was actually impressed. I was more impressed in this fight here with her striking and her execution of her understanding the distance. Although, it sucked that she was up against the cage because Raquel was only doing so much when she had her up in the clinch. But I was actually impressed with GDR in terms of the length of her strikes, the way she was using her combinations, her footwork, slipping, getting back out of the way whenever Raquel was attacking. So, did her stock value skyrocket? No. Did it move up a little bit? Yeah, I think so. I'm kind of impressed with, not overly impressed, but I am impressed with her performance. Only for me, because when I was watching it, I'm like, hey, you know what? She looks a little bit better than her last fights. I mean, I could be wrong, right? I shouldn't say last fights, because Sean will say last fight. But yeah, I think she did look pretty good. Nothing spectacular. She's not going to get a title shot from this, but didn't mind it at all.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that Germaine de Randamie's last fight was either against Jack Johnson or Carl Gotch. That's been, I think that was around the time that she fought last, something around like 95 years ago. I'm pretty sure. Raquel Pennington didn't look in shape. She missed weight. What wasn't a good situation for her, but she's also faced a long layoff. James, we saw both of these women. I joked about Durand, but these were long layoffs. And even though Pennington fought in May, I mean, she had not fought since 2016 before that and dealt with that gruesome leg injury. Do you think any of that played into Pennington's performance? She just didn't look prepared.
Yeah, and I honestly think she probably should have taken some more time off after the Nunes fight. Maybe like a full year, because that was a pretty gruesome beatdown from Amanda Nunes in that fight. I know they wanted to put this matchup together. I know this was in Denver, so obviously she wanted to be on this card as a native of Denver. But it's one of those things where you got to look at it's clear she wasn't prepared. She missed weight. And this wasn't a great performance from her. I don't think, Durand definitely, won the fight. She dominated. She looked great. But I think also Rocky didn't show her best in this fight. And is her best, behind her at this point with the injuries? We don't know. We're going to have to find out in the next fight. But if I'm her, I'm taking a lot of time off, reassessing things, and making sure that when I come in there, I'm fully prepared, because it seemed like in this matchup, she wasn't.
And then when you got two people that are, I mean, this is Durand's first fight since the title fight. She didn't do herself any favors that entire time she was out. I mean, she took the fight in February of last year to get a title. Understandable. You can do that, but can't imagine many people are going to clamor for her to fight Cris Cyborg anytime soon. We have Beneil Dariush, who I said the UFC would like to keep him around in the, well, maybe he can win this fight division. Jim Miller, Joe Lozon, you have all these guys that have been around forever. Thiago Moises was his latest victim, and a victim that he needed, James, because he was tiptoeing that area where the UFC likes him, but I don't know if they like him enough for him to not win 4 or 5 straight fights and keep him.
Yeah, this was a complete domination. Thiago Moises did not look good. This was just a bad performance from him. And I think, that's the thing. If he wasn't able to go in there and finish Dariush early, like we've seen in the Alex Hernandez fight, it was going to be a long night for him. And Dariush just showed that, when he doesn't get knocked out, he's quite the talent in the division. This was, again, but the only problem with this fight, I'd say, is just that does this win do much for Dariush other than it gets him back in the win column? I think first win since, I want to say November 2016, 17 maybe, where he beat Rashid Magomedov. So it's been a while since he's had a win. So it was good in that sense, but the win didn't do much. I saw people saying, "Oh, we forget how good this guy is." Well, he's got to win. I mean, that's the thing. You need to get back in the win column. So step one is that. But let's see how he does against some higher level competition in that division, because clearly the talent's there. It's just a matter of if he's able to make adjustments when he fights guys that are coming out against him aggressively.
A fight that I want to talk to you about, Joe, specifically, was this Chas Skelly, Bobby Moffett fight. This Darce choke that was locked in. Referee called a stop to the action just as Skelly stopped walking his body around. I mean, immediately. But as soon as the choke is let loose, Skelly's fine. He's okay. I don't think it's a good sign when the commission takes the referee pretty much by the hand and says, "Hey, you have the benefit of replay." And instead of watching the replay, the referee is defending his decision while watching the replay throughout from the beginning. He did not want the possibility of his mind to be changed for better or for worse. Let's talk about that and the odd decision to call that a technical knockout.
Well, it's not a technical knockout, because if that's the case, it's a technical submission.
Yes.
Right? It should not be a technical knockout under unified rules of mixed martial arts. When you're looking at the decision, it wasn't done via strikes. It was done via submission. Therefore, technical submission. So there's I'm with Paul Felder here in a manner where it's very difficult to say who's right, who's wrong, and which way to go with this. You can make the argument. Now, if I'm the referee, and my job is always enforce the unified rules of mixed martial arts, make sure there's no fouls, and fighter safety is paramount. That's the number one thing. So we're in a situation here where a fighter's kind of getting dominated. Now he's in a submission. Now I'm paying way more attention because he's gone into defense mode or quote unquote survival mode. So now I'm kind of looking what's happening here. I'm paying attention to, are the two arteries being blocked? And he's getting squeezed, and I'm paying attention to body language. I'm paying attention to his eyes. I'm paying attention to see if I can see if there's focus in his eyes. And then it gets to the point where, oh, this is on tight. This could happen at any time. You don't need 3 taps. You need 1 tap. Even the hand motion is you're just getting ready. As soon as it touches, you go in. So, or if you feel the fighter is unconscious, you touch the arm, you touch a limb just to see if there's any reaction. And he did that. And based on that, he figured, you know what? It's fight over. It's done. He's out. Let's end it. So he takes the arm, calls the fight, choke is released, and boom, he pops up. Now, John, you've been choked before to the point where you're almost unconscious, but once you're out of it, there's times you can just, whoa, everything's fine. Everything's good. Whoa, that was close, right? Now, remember, with Chaz, he's in a higher state of training, pain, being able to compete. So at that point there, he probably just woke up or didn't really fall asleep, could have been falling asleep. It was like, hey, man, I'm not out, right? So he wanted the benefit of the doubt. In terms of the referee going over and watching the replay, if it's available to you, you should take advantage of it. Okay, fine. Fight is over. Now we need to determine A, was your call correct? Or B, was your call incorrect? If it's incorrect, we go to a no contest. Okay. If it's correct, let's find out why. So I don't think we got all the vantage point, all the footage of the referee looking at the camera, but I did see what you were saying, that when the cameras were on him, he was just defending it. He was defending it, right? So I do understand that, but the decision was incorrect. If you're going to stick with it, it's not a technical knockout, it's a technical submission. So I would like to see a rematch in this, even though that, I'm sure people will say, Chaz will lose his fight 9 times out of 10. I would like to see it again just to make things right.
James, your reaction to this situation, how did you feel? Did you think the stoppage was justified?
Yeah, this was a bad stoppage. I think clearly Chaz Skelly should get a rematch in this situation. He clearly wasn't out when he got up after the referee, and it's just unfortunate because he's had such a long layoff. He needed this fight, he needed this win, and to have it end like that is just unfortunate. The UFC doesn't. I mean, we've seen it before, but sometimes they're very hesitant to do rematches like this. I think this is a clear-cut case to do a rematch. I believe Alex Oliveira, Tim Means, I think they did a rematch there, but I've seen other times where there has been controversy, and they just told the fighters, "Hey, move on." I mean, they did that with Alvarez and Poirier at first when they matched them up with different opponents. So hopefully they do the rematch, because I think the fans and the fighters themselves didn't get a fair shake as far as this fight went. And it was a bad stoppage.
James, anything else that stood out to you on this UFC Denver show?
Oh, a lot. Devontae Smith, can we talk about this guy? Wins the Contender Series, comes out here, fights Julian Erosa on short notice and finishes him in the first round. This guy is a star, in my opinion. I think he, everyone references his loss to John Gunther from years ago. I think he is nowhere near that type of fighter. And I think him moving to Factory X and training over there, Factory X had a great night. I think they went 3-0, and then they could even technically have gone 4-0, because I know Mike Trezano trained there for the last part of his camp. But great win for him. Big things ahead. He called out Ross Pearson. Now, Ross Pearson is out of his fight against Joseph Duffy, we're hearing, because of an injury. So when Pearson's all healed up, it sounds like he would like to fight Devontae, and we'll see what happens there. But very good performance. Most predictable fight on the card, Davey Ramos gets a submission over John Gunther. I don't know why they made this fight. I guess the UFC is just like, well, you won your UFC fight, we have to keep you around. Now we're going to give you a submission guy, really good guy on the mat and all that. And I'm curious to get your guys' thoughts on this quickly. The Ashley Yoder and Amanda Cooper fight. How did you guys score that? Very close fight. It went to Yoder. I think you could make the argument for Cooper, but the fact is Cooper has another loss. I think she might be an Invicta next. We'll see what happens. But what did you guys think of that fight?
Cooper won the fight.
Yeah, Cooper should have won that fight. And I feel really bad for her that she didn't get that win. She's got a very deceiving record because of Tough and her amateur fights. And as I've mentioned before, I put more stock into female amateur fights than I do male amateur fights, because so often you're going to run into women that you're going to see in the UFC. It's such a smaller circuit that I put a lot more stock into it. And quite frankly, there are a lot of one-fight amateurs who are as good as one-fight pros on that level of things. But I feel bad. I hope she doesn't get cut from it, but she should have won the fight. And Joe, it seems like you echoed that sentiment.
Yeah, she won the fight, in my opinion. On my scorecards, she won. Close fight, good fight, but I don't think it should have went to Ashley at all. It was, I could see where people may make the argument, but no, on my scorecards, it was Amanda Cooper. I think I had 2 rounds to 1. The irony is this. There's nothing, there are many things that are worse when it comes to judges' decisions. Look at it this way. 2 judges had it 29-28 for Ashley. The other judge gave it 30-27 to Amanda. Right? Do the math. That's not good. Right? If it was 29-28 the other way, you can see that. But it was 30-27 the other way. Something, I don't know, something's weird sometimes when I see these decisions. I'm like, I don't know what you saw or where the fight took place, but in my honest opinion, Amanda Cooper won that fight. And David Ramos, that guy there is, I know it was John Gunther, James, but Ramos, I don't want that guy anywhere near me to grab a hold of me, because if he gets a hold of you, man, is that guy good.
James, you mentioned the the Devontae Smith fight, Julian Erosa. It's like, how can you make sure that a Dana White's Contender Series product wins? Well, you just match them up.
Yeah,
right.
Pretty much.
I think that's a nice way to go about it. But UFC, I loved all the graphics. I loved the retro music. I loved the mat. I loved all that, and it was a nice touch that I really enjoyed. Also, a nice touch was Showdown Joe last week when we said Floyd Mayweather to Rizin. He goes, "I don't buy it." The Rizin play-by-play commentator from the jump, from the moment I messaged him, said, "Yeah, that's not gonna happen at all. You were pretty transparent about this, Joe." Now, a lot of people in your position would have been like, "Wow, Floyd Mayweather, what a wonderful opportunity this is, and I can't wait to call his fight." You were very, very transparent about this straight out of the gate.
I didn't say it wasn't going to happen. I just thought to myself, I don't see how this is going to work, or I don't understand where it's coming from. I get that they wanted to keep it secret and stuff like that, but it was always one of those things where it's like, man, I get to call a Floyd Mayweather fight. This can't be real. This is going to be awesome, but I'm going to believe it when I see it, right? It was one of those things because something just seemed a little bit off, and who knows, maybe it's Floyd simply negotiating, or who knows what it could be. It just, because it came for me out of nowhere, and before you know it, it happened the day of the podcast, or the night before we came on the air. And due to the time zone change and trying to get the information that I wanted before we went on air, it was difficult. And I just said, there's something a little off here. And I said, well, why wouldn't you? When I started looking at Floyd's interviews, which he didn't do any, and then his social media, I'm like, what's going on here? Like, why hasn't he posted anything either? Why is it just Rizin? And that could have been something that was agreed upon. But I'm like, like anything. And James knows. James goes back to my Sportsnet days when I had UFC Central, the TV show. I would rarely give my opinion unless I had both sides of the story, whether I did the interviews with the fighters or managers or Dana White, or at least we had some public record of the two. I'd present the information, tell the viewer, here's where we're at, make the call, in my opinion, yay or nay sort of thing. So with this one here, I was like, oh man, something's got to give here. And then also when I was told that the beginning of November in Japan is like our April Fools, I'm like, are they telling me the truth, or are they joking with me? Are they playing a joke? Is it a publicity stunt? Is it real? Maybe it is real. And I'm like, I don't know what to think. And next thing you know, Ross Sapp sends me the information. Hey, we're live on the air in 5, 4, 3. And I'm like, oh, well, let's just go with what I got here.
Yeah, James, this unfolded pretty quickly and unraveled pretty quickly. What do you think happened? Did Mayweather get worked? I heard somebody joke, they said Mayweather thought he was getting paid in dollars instead of yen, which I thought was very funny. But he backtracked very quickly, but it's a win all around for Rizin. They got free pub for one of their big stars now.
Yeah, I think, I'd sort of lean towards Rizin not really giving much information on the opponent that Floyd was supposed to fight, or the rules or anything like that. Someone made a joke that, Floyd didn't read the contract, because he has trouble reading. So there's stuff like that. But yeah, it's a win for Rizin. Like I said, this one everywhere. There's people that I follow on Twitter that don't talk anything even close to combat sports, and they were talking about this fight. So it was just free publicity for Rizin. Again, the truth lies somewhere in the middle. I know Floyd didn't write that response. There's no way that lengthy response where it's like, I didn't know what was, this and that. But hey, good for Rizin, I guess, getting their name out there in a week where one championship, sort of dominated everything with all the signings. Rizin kind of topped them with this Floyd stuff.
Yeah, then that's the kind of publicity. I say you can't buy it, but they did. They essentially did. They kind of paid him for the press conference and all that stuff. But that's a level of publicity that is real hard to put a price tag on. Getting a photo op next to Floyd Mayweather, you can run with the narrative that Floyd Mayweather is ducking this guy. That's there. You can use that. People are going to say that. I'm going to say it every week, for the love of God. I love it. Joe, from a branding perspective, what does this do for Rizin?
Clearly, it does great things for Rizin because, again, we're talking about it, although we do talk about it quite often, probably more than anybody because I'm affiliated with them and I do the play-by-play. There were many, many outlets. I was scrolling through some of the sports channels here, and then we had some feeds from south of the border where people were giving their thoughts. There were some prominent people, not just broadcasters, but involved in the, in various sports that were talking about this and bringing it up. So tons of publicity for Rizin. From what I'm told, Saitama Super Arena sold out now, and this came after this press conference. Now, I don't know what the rules are in Japan in terms of, when a main event changes, people can ask for their money back. Maybe there's more stuff that we don't know about, but yeah, there's been some great notoriety towards Rizin, and it's fantastic publicity. I'm super glad, but I haven't been in touch with them. They're not responding to any of the requests that I'm making. Again, time zone changes, things are going on, and maybe everything let's look at it this way, guys. Maybe everything was A-okay when Floyd left Japan, and all of a sudden he lands, and this happens, and he posts this. Could be a negotiation tactic, throwing Rizin into the, oh my goodness, what are you doing, Floyd? Maybe they're just cleaning up or trying to figure out, hey, whoa, this is what you agreed upon. Can we talk about this? I think you should post this. I think you should say that. So we don't know what's happening behind the scenes. I tried to get as much information as I could, not get much, but maybe everything is A-okay. We just don't know until something comes out. So I'm trying to get it, just not happening yet.
UFC 230 buy rate is out. It's around 250,000. Joe, what does this number do for you?
What's the number?
I think it's like 250,000. Not a great number. Definitely not by old UFC standards, but I mean, UFC's still making a good amount of money off of that. But
yeah, I mean, it goes back to the standards or the numbers that were, when 4 or 5 years ago, which, again, if it wasn't for Ross Sapp, I wouldn't even know that these numbers were so low in comparison. You had a champ defending the title. You had what's now pretty much a popular contender. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see, when you take a look at the trajectory as to who gets which amount of pay-per-view buys, the percentage, because, what is, I pretty much know what Khabib Nurmagomedov is worth to the UFC. I've got a good taste in terms of what I was told what Conor McGregor is worth to the UFC. I don't know what Daniel Cormier is worth to the UFC versus, a guy whose popularity and Derrick Lewis is beginning to go up. I think the number is low. Maybe Sean, you tell me, maybe, or James, maybe it's correct. Maybe that's what the number should be with these two guys fighting on the top. What I do know is that when the UFC was doing anything and everything possible to get mixed martial arts sanctioned or regulated in New York State, they always promised big shows, big shows in the state whenever they were, or good name value shows, especially at Madison Square Garden. And it just, the timing was terrible to put on a mega show here. Which is what they try and do at Madison Square Garden. And obviously for another reason, business reason, because the amount of money they spent in trying to sanction and regulate New York, they want to make that money back in that same state. So interesting to see.
James, your thoughts on this number?
Yeah, it's not great, but I've said this time and time again, you're not going to get strong pay-per-view numbers in this day and age unless you have, so many notable names that even all the casual fans are going to flock to it. So it doesn't surprise me with the number. I think the pay-per-view model is, even though in boxing we're still seeing strong numbers, I think in general it's a tough sell for the combat sports fan, because you do have to, pay for cable, you have to pay for Paramount Network, like, DAZN now with Bellator. I think pay-per-view is a tough sell these days with a lot of people because of the fact, as a combat sports fan, if you want to watch everything, you're paying out of pocket in a lot of ways. So, they're going to keep running into this problem regardless of who's on the card, because again, I think pay-per-view, the model, it's just not sustainable, I don't think, in the future.
Speaking of DAZN, I heard that Bellator show that kicked off their brand essentially did 35,000 views, subs. Not a great number for a show of that quality, James.
No, the Moose couldn't deliver, I guess,
Yeah. Joe, does that number surprise you? 35K for DAZN? I mean, that's a type of thing that you got to go out of your way to watch.
You just nailed it on the head. It's a number that, doesn't surprise me one bit. There's a bunch of things with DAZN that have me a tad puzzled. A variety of things with DAZN that have me a tad puzzled. And Bellator took a risk by putting it on that platform. I'd like to know what the ratings were here in Canada, because it did air in Canada. So I'd like to know what it did here. But yeah, it's a risk, man. I know we're trending. We're all going towards, streaming everything online, pay for everything online, almost, it's a weird, way of saying it, James. Almost like a pay-per-view, you pay, or on demand, right? You basically want to get what you want to get when you want to get it. You don't really have to subscribe anymore. So it is sort of weird. And yeah, I mean, illegal streaming is out there. It's not that difficult to find any streams nowadays. I get people still messaging me to this day, and I mean friends of mine or acquaintances. They're like, "Hey man, you watching UFC?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, it's my job. Here's the link." I'm like, "Dude, I watch it on my television. I ordered the pay-per-view." "Oh, I don't order the pay-per-view. You can just watch it here." I don't want to watch it there. I get it. And it's over and over again. And it's like, oh, guys, I'm the wrong guy to be sending that to. I don't want to see that kind of stuff. But it's out there, man. And it's the same thing, with any one of the, even boxing, when Triple G last fought with Canelo. People are sending me these links. And I don't want to watch it, man. I'm good. So is what it is.
This is something that I am rather excited to talk about because there's so much to talk about. The UFC Flyweight division and what is going on there. Personally, I was stoked when the UFC's Flyweight division was brought in because, hey, I'm a homer. Demetrious Johnson was born on Kentucky land. I knew that he would have the opportunity to become Flyweight champion. He did. He was the greatest Flyweight champion of all time. We have seen fighters be peeled off from this roster. It's real confusing what's going on right now. Fighters getting fired. Shorty Torres, who both of you know very, very well, who competed not just at 125, but could compete at 135 and wanted to compete at 145 at one point. James, you spoke to him. He said that he made that offer, and he thinks that because he made that offer, maybe the UFC was like, you know what, let's start firing some of these guys. It's kind of a weird situation, and it gets weirder.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack from this. How about Jared Brooks coming off a win and gets cut? I guess his contract ran out, so they're like, okay, good enough excuse. We're going to get rid of you. Yeah, it sort of came out of nowhere. Flow Combat was the first to report that the division was coming to the demise. And we see all the fighters coming out and saying, yeah, Jose Shorty Torres, Jared Brooks, Justin Scoggins, Roberto Sanchez, all these guys getting let go. And to make matters so much more confusing, they say that TJ Dillashaw and Henry Cejudo, by the way, that's for the flyweight title. What's going on here? So, I mean, for me, it's like I feel bad for Shorty, especially. I mean, Joe and I both know that Shorty should have been in the UFC a while ago. He beat whoever he could to get in there. And, he kind of described in the interview, the quote that sort of stood out to me is like, it was like I was in an abusive relationship. And it's true. He got treated like crap. There's no other way to look at that. This is an exciting guy, a young guy, a guy who's still got a ton of potential. And the kicker is he fought at bantamweight in Titan as well. He fought at both weight classes, won a title in both weight classes, and they're still getting rid of him after one loss. Granted, not a great fight, but you're getting rid of him after one loss. That's bad business decision, in my opinion. I feel for the flyweights. I feel for everyone in the division. I get that it wasn't the most exciting division, but the UFC's to blame for this as well. I mean, there were times when they had marquee flyweight fights that they were putting on the prelims. How are you supposed to get fans invested in a division when you're not showcasing those fights? So, yeah, it's just an unfortunate situation all around. And hopefully, your ACBs, your Rizin, your One Championships, sign these guys, and they can have a better life post UFC.
Joe, your thoughts on this being a flyweight title fight now? Cejudo and Dillashaw, it seems so just arbitrary to just make, he wants two titles, so let's do it. Why? And now Cejudo's saying, yeah, but I'm going to get a rematch for his 135 title. No! This 135 title has already been log jammed for so long. You've had like 4 guys compete for it over the last several years. What about the Marlon Moraeses of the world? What about them?
Yeah, when I first saw the news that the fight potentially is happening, that title fight or the super fight's happening at 125 pounds for the flyweight title, the first thing that went to my mind is TJ Dillashaw is trying to become another champ. He wants to cut down there, prove he can do it, fight, become the champ. Now he's got 2 titles, one that's about to get eliminated, and then everyone has to go to 135 pounds to fight him. But it does clog up the division. Once again, there are a lot of title contenders at 135 pounds that deserve title shots. And I get the fact that it's going to be Henry Cejudo, who they've always wanted at 135 anyways, right? So, he'll get that shot eventually. It is a weird scenario. I think it's absolutely, it's sad. It sucks. I would love to know the real reasoning behind why the UFC is making this decision. And I'm pretty sure we all know why. That it's Sean, you and I have talked about this. It's that state of Texas theory. Everything's bigger in Texas. People like bigger fighters, and they don't like small guys fighting. But there's a way to promote it, and you could have promoted Demetrious Johnson on so many different levels. Although there could be a caveat there in stating that maybe Demetrious didn't want to do all that promotion, was happy what he was doing, right? So now he's getting that payday at 1, but the whole division now is getting cut here and there. Shorty Torres should be fighting at 135. Make him fight at 135. The guy's a very exciting fighter, fantastic promotion, but I know firsthand that he was once blocked by UFC matchmaker Mick Maynard, just blocked because he was trying to get in there. He was sitting there like, what else do I have to do? And, you know, Shorty's interview when he said, or that social media post when he said what he said, and I knew, I was like, man, the UFC is going to look at that and say, yep, you're done. It's like you can't speak up against them, right? And if there was ever a case for a situation where these boys need a union, here it is, right? They need representation to say, you just can't cut us out like this. Like, what's going on here? But, you know, this is where we're at right now, and I honestly think it sucks. I think it's absolutely terrible. You know, the benefits are hopefully the other associations or promotions, can take advantage of this because you've got now the best fighters in the world available to you at 125 pounds.
James, you reported just before we went on the air that former flyweight Luis Smoka, who I can confirm does like the polka. So that's some John Candy for you guys. But he's returning to the UFC. And I said, wow, they're bringing back a flyweight. And you said, well, let me be clear, it's at bantamweight. And I'm just thinking, man, they have a whole mess of flyweights that want to go to bantamweight and got fired. Guys in their top 15. Did this new... Okay, so, man, I don't even know how to frame this. I'm so mind-boggled. Good for Luis Smoka. I like Luis Smoka. He's young. He's a good fighter. You know, it's good for him. But are you surprised they brought him back, especially in the middle of all this?
I'm not surprised, and I'll tell you why. I think that he was a guy that, you know, it's been well documented. He had a substance abuse problem when he was in the UFC, and that's why he lost a lot of those fights. He just, you know, it was really impacting his training, and he was fighting tough guys. And I think, you know, the UFC was very high on him. You remember when he fought Paddy Holohan in the main event, and that, you know, that was sort of the pinnacle of his career at that point. And, you know, it really seemed like he was destined for a title shot, and that didn't end up happening, unfortunately. And, you know, he strung together some losses, and I think the UFC said, like, look, take care of your personal issues. We'll keep an eye on you, and we'll see what happens. And that's exactly what he's done. He moved from Hawaii to California. He's been sober apparently since the beginning of the year. He's won all of his fights by stoppage. I think what it comes down to is they wanted exciting guys in the UFC, and he's a guy that I think that they didn't want to let go. They knew how young he was, and they knew that he brings the exciting matchups. It's just he needed to figure some things out. So he figured that out. They're bringing him back. I should mention, too, from the sources that I spoke with, he is going to be fighting very soon. I believe, you know, my sources are telling me possibly that China card next week. He's going to be fighting on that. So this is another short notice thing. And yes, they could have brought up Jared Brooks or whoever to there. But I mean, unfortunately for Brooks and Roberto Sanchez and, you know, a few of those other guys, you know, often they go to decision. They're not guys that are really getting you out of your seat and you know, really sort of captivating it. Shorty Torres is one of those guys. That one I don't agree with. Justin Scoggins, very exciting, but, you know, he had lost, 4 of his last 5. That's I can understand that. But I think the reasoning behind bringing Smolka back is just that fans loved him. He's an entertaining fighter. He's cleaned things up. I think they want to see what he's made of, especially at bantamweight where he's not cutting that extra weight.
So if you you look at the UFC rankings right now, it's going to be a mess. By the way, they've redone their rankings, so it already is a mess. And I can't even pull it up. I don't think they even have. Yeah, they do have flyweight rankings. Okay. Or they have pound for pound rankings. I don't even know how to navigate these right now. It's such a stark change that my Google Chrome says that it's unsafe to go to. But okay, I finally pulled it up. Number 15. Do you know who number 15 in these rankings are, guys?
Neil Seery.
Neil Seery.
Oh, geez.
Do you want to know why that's significant, guys? He's not a fucking fighter anymore. Pardon my language. I mean, you all are two respected MMA journalists. I am not. I'm a respected pro wrestling journalist, so I'm allowed to act like this. Neil Seery doesn't fight anymore. Or did I miss something?
You are correct, sir.
You're correct.
Didn't he retire? He retired. And the balls on these guys. The grapefruits on the UFC. Not only is he number 15, he's tied at number 15 with a guy who actually fights. So they could have easily just said, you know what, we'll just omit him from this list. It was a clerical error. it was a mistake here, but there's another 15. So what's the harm? But they didn't do that. Oh, this is such a mess. It is such a mess. And I mean, the way that I see it, hey, Sergio Pettis is hitting the bricks, whatever. Benavidez, you could put him at bantamweight. I'm sure he'll do fine. John Moraga, same thing. Wilson Hayes, same thing. Some of these other guys, they're probably just going to get cut. They'll find work elsewhere. If I'm Bellator, I start a flyweight division tomorrow just to do it. But there's one name that is particularly interesting for a number of reasons. Ray Borg, who has had everything from glass in his face to issues with his child, which I hope get better, but the man has pulled out of so many fights. James, do you think the UFC has mercy on him and has him try 135, or do you think he's done so?
He's staying. 100% he's staying. Mark my words, he will be in the UFC and he will be fighting at bantamweight. Who's his manager? Simple as that.
It's a good point. That's a very good point. And
one thing, I'll bring this up later, but you mentioned the Marlon Moraes thing too. It's kind of funny because Moraes is managed by Ali. Henry Cejudo is managed by Ali. So it's like he's kind of screwing over one client to help another client. That thing's, I mean, it's, the whole thing's just very weird. But to answer your question, yeah, Borg will stay with the UFC. He's beloved by everyone. And despite all his, if it was anyone else, if it was, I don't know who, any random person on the roster, they're gone. But it's because it's Ray Borg and because he's with Ali. I think having Ali, that extra protection, I think will keep him around. And, from what I've been told, anyone coming off a loss is cut. So Brandon Moreno's cut from what I heard. Aaron Bronstetter posted that yesterday, which is crazy if you think about it. I mean, how, the streak he was on, like how he's out of the UFC, and some of the other guys that have stuck around are, it's just kind of crazy, sort of their reasoning. So yeah, and just I mean, yeah, we're going to see more of it. But yeah, from my understanding is if you're coming off a loss in the flyweight division, you're cut. Doesn't matter who you are. The only exception I think was Jared Brooks, like I mentioned, but like I said, he had a 4-fight deal. The Roberto Sanchez's 4th fight, so they're like, hey, kick bricks.
So as we wrap up this conversation, what does this mean for the other divisions? Because this could have a ripple effect. Dana White says, we don't want to add more divisions. Well, if you don't have a flyweight division, you don't really have an excuse to not add 165 and 175. If you do that, combined with this, you're going to have a lot of smaller guys moving up to bantamweight. I would like to hope that this causes a ripple effect and oversized 135s move up and then vice versa. I'm not convinced of that. But Joe, do you think that this move improves the possibility of adding a 165 and 175 division and scrapping 170?
If Dana White wakes up, yeah. He won't. He's always been one of those guys that's taking a little bit. It takes a little longer to come out and say, yeah, we're doing this. I mean, just look at the Ronda Rousey. Just look at when they brought in flyweight. Just look at when they brought in the women's divisions in general. Just look at how long it took for him to put on the Ultimate Fighter with the ladies. There's a bunch of different things that I look at when it comes to this stuff here. Now, the ripple effect was something I was talking to a friend about. Was it yesterday or the day before? In essence, similar to what you're saying, but it goes back to what you and I have talked about for a very long time, whereby I believe the UFC needs to cut their roster big time. They got to start putting on better shows with higher quality fighters, with higher quality fights that actually mean something. So if you're getting rid, it sucks, but if you're getting rid of a whole division, some of them are allowed to move up. Some of the ones at the bottom of the bantamweight division, why don't you just cut them? And the ones that do want to stay, they go up to featherweight. Some of the guys that are at the bottom of featherweight, you don't want them, get rid of them, and just keep going until you've got only X amount of people. First of all, this top 15 thing I've never liked. It should only be top 10. Okay, so top 10 means something. When you're number 14 in the world, nobody cares. But when you're number 10, it feels like you're on the cusp of something. You better protect that number 10 ranking. So, in my opinion, the UFC, and God, I've just been saying it for so long that I feel stupid that I'm constantly bringing it up all the time. But cut the fighters that should not be in the Super Bowl of MMA. Cut the fighters that are not UFC fighters. It just seems like anybody can make it to the UFC. It's not true, but that's the sense that it's out there. It should be top 10 only per division. Every fight should mean something. Every fighter should either be trying to crack the top 10 or protecting their position in the top 10, trying to get into title contention, trying to get to number 1 contention, fighting for a title. That's how the UFC should be operating things. But whatever. They're a billion-dollar entity based on what they've done, but things got to change.
If you're top 15, you might be on the verge of retirement based on the UFC standards.
You could retire and just be put in there for no reason.
Yeah. UFC Argentina this weekend. We're going to go through the show quickly. James, anything on the prelim show stand out to you? Because right now, off the top of my head, I'm looking at that flyweight fight with Sasaki and Pantoja, and I'm thinking, you better win.
Pretty much, yeah. That's exactly right. There's a couple interesting fights in here. I'm interested that Austin Arnett got another fight with the UFC. He's gone 0-2. He's fighting Humberto Banade, at featherweight. So his job's on the line too. That should be an interesting one. Cynthia Calvillo. Well, actually, no, that's the main card. But yeah, the prelims. Devin Powell's back. He's always an interesting guy. This is just, not much to really write home about. None of these fights are really that intriguing, in my opinion, especially the flyweight one that, we know that there's no future at flyweight for either of them.
The main card, by the way, guys, not sure when or if I'll do a wrap-up that is the same night as NXT TakeOver War Games. So kind of a battle with time there. But if not, then we definitely will cover this next week. Go ahead and hit me with her name, Joe. You're great with pronouncing names like Polyana has, and I'm not going to do it the disservice of saying it before you.
What, Polyana Botello?
Come on. You know how to say it, Joe.
Poliana Botello.
Oh, come on. You just suck the fun out of a room. She's fighting Cynthia Calvillo.
I know.
Calvillo, a fighter who was not a professional fighter when Fightful started. And she's taking the biggest layoff of her career because, quite frankly, she didn't have time to take a layoff before then. In a year and a half, she went from not a pro, James, to making it to the UFC, to going on an awesome run and beating Joanne Calderwood, to losing her first fight against a former UFC champion. How do you think she'll bounce back with this time off against Polyana Botelho?
Layoffs affect everyone differently. She could be getting a lot better in the gym. We don't really know. I'm always concerned with layoffs, and you also have to factor in the travel for this fight for her. Is that going to play a role in this as well, although she has fought overseas before? This is a big fight for her. And again, she had so much momentum last year. I remember being in Buffalo when she beat Pearl Gonzalez. She was, she was at the presser. Dana White was referencing her, here and there. She's got to get the momentum back. So this is a huge fight. If she loses here, that's going to kill everything she accomplished in 2017, in my opinion. So she's got to go out there and take care of business. But a very tough opponent, like you said, 7-1 record. She's got her work cut out for her. And the other thing is, with the travel, the weight cut, how's that going to impact that too? We'll see. But she's really got to win this fight.
Joe, as James mentioned, everybody responds to layoffs differently, but we're seeing a couple of women similar in age, similar in experience, except for that Botelho has been around longer. She has the same amount of fights. When you see somebody like Calvillo cram that many fights into such a short amount of time, what does that say to you?
Well, there's a lot of things you could look into that. Personally, I don't recommend it. But then again, it depends if the fighter's young and gung-ho, or they're older and trying to get as much as they can out of their career before they get too old. So it is kind of strange, but you take a look at her record, the way you described it before, it is kind of weird. It is a bit challenging, but yeah, it's a tough call. And of course, with any sort of layoff, nothing good comes from it, in my opinion. But I have seen, guys like Freddie Essensal take on Jay-Z and emerge victorious. And in a post-fight interview, tell me flat to my face in front of everybody and everybody that was tuned in at the time that, ring rust isn't real. It never is real. Well, okay, maybe not, but
we also used to hear the guillotine was a myth from certain fighters.
Yeah, right. So the irony is, I just realized this, James. Freddie hasn't fought since winning that title, ever, anywhere.
Yeah, I saw him this summer. He was supposed to be in the PFL tournament, but he suffered another injury. The guy just can't catch a break.
Both brothers go through it, or two of the three brothers go through a lot then. But yeah, just back to Cynthia for a second. It's just a strange scenario, but I like the fight. I do like the fight, so we'll see how it all unfolds. But what time does this card actually start?
Normal time.
Normal time? All right.
Yeah,
I'll do my hair. Perfect.
Normal time. Also, Guido Canetti, Marlon Vera on this show at bantamweight. When I see guys like that, and I see Marlon Vera, who's lost 2 of his last 3, and I see Guido Canetti, who is win-loss, win-loss, and then I see a possibly soon-to-be bloated bantamweight division. That's another one that I look at with Canetti at 38 years old, and I'm like, hey, you should probably win that fight if you want to make sure you hang around, especially since UFC is getting very just wishy-washy about letting people go on wins. You also have Cesar Ferreira against Ian Heinisch. Cesar on quite a streak, won 5 of his last 6. Anything in particular you're looking for out of this fight, James?
Well, Heinisch, I should mention, trains at Factory X, and that team has been on a roll right now. And he also won on Contender Series, and he also, or sorry, he didn't win on Contender Series. He won the LFA title, and so then that sort of prompted him to, get the UFC contract and everything else. But it's a tough task. He's taken this on short notice. Now, what I heard is that he was supposed to be on this Denver card, and they had an issue with his opponent, and so he wasn't able to get on there. So he's fighting the week later and fighting Ferreira, who is a killer in that division. I mean, that's a tough task. And Heinisch, if you look at his only loss, was to Marcus Perez, and that was a first-round submission. And Ferreira, known for that, he did that to Carl Robertson in his last fight. So going to be an interesting fight here. But Heinisch, again, from everyone that I've talked to at Factory X, just really good. And by the way, I got to correct myself. He did win on Contender Series. It's tough to keep track of everyone, but should be a good fight.
It is. I am so ready for Tough to go. I cannot wait to not pay attention to The Ultimate Fighter until the finals. I am so excited for that. We also have Khalil Roundtree against Johnny Walker. What? Johnny Walker doesn't even have a Wikipedia page, and he's fighting a guy that has like 9 fights between UFC and Tough, Joe.
I just want to see Johnny Walker fight Jack Daniels, but
son of a bitch. How dare you?
Yeah. I think he's really going to make a splash in this fight.
Oh, God.
I know we're quick. We got to wrap this up here, but Khalil Roundtree is a favorite at -250. We're not going to put 5 on it, but I think Khalil emerges victorious.
Yeah, he's going to have him on the rocks for sure.
Oh, God damn. Such a weird booking after he beat Gokhan Saki. But whatever, it's a Contender Series guy. I guess they figure, well, the worst that can happen is that he loses to a Contender Series guy. I'm excited to see how they push these fellas. Ricardo Lamas, Darren Elkins. This is an underrated fight. My God. Darren Elkins was close to retirement and just changed his life, changed his career, and went on a 6-fight winning streak. Lost to Volkanovski. Ricardo Lamas, a former title challenger, but has lost 2 in a row. I'm going with Elkins in this one. I think he's going to be able to grind it out, and that Lamas is not an easy guy to grind it out against. But James, your thoughts on this one?
Just a great matchup. Again, I think the winner of Lamas and Elkins should fight Yair Rodriguez next. But both these guys have something to prove. Trying to stay relevant in that division. Lamas is one of those guys, man, where just when you think you want to count him out, he pulls off a big win, and I think he has that opportunity here on Saturday. But Elkins, as we've seen with the Mirsad Bektic fight, never count him out either. So I'm excited for this one. Both guys, lots of experience, going to put it all on the line in the co-main event.
The +200 Elkins is definitely one of my I got 5 on it, as is, I'd probably say Sasaki at +230, because why not? And yeah, that's probably the extent of my I got 5 on it. Well, outside of this main event, Joe, your thoughts on the co-main event, though?
I got 5 on Elkins. Done.
Yeah,
nothing else to talk about.
He seems like a pretty safe I got 5 on it. I mean, the guy, I don't doubt that he can beat anybody below that top 5 at some, given the right night for him. You also have Santiago Ponzinibbio, a -330 favorite over Neil Magny +260. I see Neil Magny as one of those guys who on any given night could beat almost anybody with the right wind resistance. He might be able to just beat anybody. He's hung around, man. He transformed his career as well. Joe, Ponzinibbio on a hot streak. Obviously, they want him to win. I'm expecting him to win, but Magny is no easy out.
No, he's not. But the expectation when the original bout of Santiago Ponzinibbio against Kamaru Usman was made, they had high hopes for Santiago. I don't think you should put 5 on this fight at all. I respect Neil Magny, of course. I think he's a fantastic talent. I just think Santiago's got skills, just fantastic. So I'm going to be looking at Santiago to pull this off.
James?
Santiago should win this fight, but if you look at Neil Magny, when he loses his fights, it's usually by submission. And Santiago, you have to go all the way back to 2012 for his last submission win. this is one of those things that, I think Neil could hang in there and could get it done. So I might put 5 on Neil because I think there is some value. Interesting thing about his camp at Elevation. Seems like the guys over at Genesis are kind of cross-training with them. So, guys like Justin Gaethje and some of the other talent out there. So getting some different looks for this camp. We'll see if that pays off in this one. But, Neil Magny, one of those guys, again, where he can always surprise. Just when you want to count him out, he can pull it off. But if I had to make my pick, I'll go Santiago.
Guys, this show brought to you by our new Fightful MMA and Boxing YouTube channel. Link is in the description below. Subscribe, leave a thumbs up, and a comment, and you will be instantly registered to win the signed Chuck Liddell Randy Couture photo ahead of Chuck Liddell's MMA return this month. Cannot believe I'm using that as a plug, but it is a real thing that exists in this world. So go ahead, subscribe to get James Lynch's interviews immediately. We used to have to kind of wait because we had so many videos going up. We had to kind of spread them out. Not anymore. Just nonstop. Good times. Follow Joe at Showdown Joe. Follow James at Lynch on Sports. Follow me at Sean Ross Sapp. And visit FightfulMMA.com. We're out.